Hi, class. I wanted to make another video that is telling you some of the anecdotes that I might have included if we were having this person in class, or having this class in person. That's what it is. Um, so first off, on the topic of standard of living versus quality of life, I wanted to mention that civilizations often optimize for standard of living because it's easier to measure and ultimately it correlates pretty well at low levels. If you give a starving person a little bit of money and they can buy some grain, some rice, or some corn to eat, that improves their quality of life and their standard of living. But ultimately, it doesn't work as well at higher average levels of income. There is some debate over whether or not money can buy you happiness at very high levels if you're rich, and if you can buy it if it's just really expensive. But ultimately, I feel like quality of life matters more than standard of living, because really that's what we want, is to have a positive experience in life. And the fact that it's hard to measure makes it a tricky target to hit. Second, on the energy consumption video, I want to mention that, so how much human manual energy do you think there is in a barrel of oil? So one barrel of oil that comes out of the ground, can correlate, it can produce the same amount of work as a certain amount of human manual labor. So I'm going to give you a second to try to guess and see what you think it would be. Okay, so a barrel of oil has the same amount of energy as 7,000 hours of human manual labor. I feel like that's really interesting to realize that it's not just like, oil and gasoline aren't just small amounts of energy. There are a lot of energy that comes in these forms. So on the topic of urban planning, I wanted to push on the difference between individual change and systemic or structural change. So there has been a corporate effort to shift responsibility onto consumers, to make sustainability be something that people need to address for themselves. But ultimately, there are a lot of structural factors that make that really difficult. For example, the average American lives 12 miles from their workplace, so they need to commute 24 miles a day, 12 miles there, 12 miles back. And that's really not a personal responsibility problem. That's more of a zoning problem. That's something where the structure of a society makes that be the case. If there aren't houses or apartments or a place to live that is near your workplace, then you inevitably need to commute. And that is going to burn fossil fuels in your car if there is not a good bus system or public transit system. So I would argue that while, yes, using fewer plastic straws is important, I would say that the structural issues are actually more central to some of the sustainability problems we're faced with, but that corporations have redirected the responsibility for sustainability from them onto individuals by framing it as a question of plastic straws rather than as a question of how these corporations, how they live their lives, or not live their lives, but how these corporations manage their various affairs. So on the topic of agricultural systems, I also wanted to mention the work of one of my PhD students, Juliet Norton, who wrote her dissertation on technology for permaculture farming. So there is a movement in small-scale gardening and small-scale agriculture that is called permaculture, that is based on the idea of companion planting, that certain species of plants grow better when they are next to each other. Certain Native American cultures used to grow corn, beans, and squash together because I think the basic gist was that the beans would fix nitrogen in the soil, the squash had big leaves that would shade out any weeds, and the corn provided a stalk that the beans could grow up. And so these three species worked pretty well together. And that is true for lots and lots of different species. And so what she was doing was building a database that would allow, in your particular microclimate, in your particular yard, to see what kinds of species might grow well there and how they could mutually reinforce each other based on the kinds of things that you wanted to grow. And so Juliet Norton did her dissertation out of UCI on that topic. So that's something I would have mentioned about agriculture. And the last story for this week is on the topic of manufacturing. In general, manufacturing happens in factories and then the goods are distributed all over the world. But I wanted to show you something interesting. This is on the topic of AI again, that I think is also pretty interesting. So there is a system called Meshy.ai that is like ChatGPT, except instead of generating human language, what it does is it generates 3D meshes. So I said to this system, I would like you to make me an awesome dragon. And my kid has a 3D printer in the garage. And so I 3D printed this model. So this is a dragon that has never existed before because it's AI generated. And I feel like it turned out pretty well. So just the notion that these AI systems are not just making videos like the ones you're learning from this class, but are also can make meshes like this, I feel like is a pretty interesting innovation that might change the way that manufacturing enacts things in the world in the coming decade. So with that, I'll have my dragon say goodbye. Thanks very much. Talk to you soon. Bye.